Welcome to Simply Mindful. I'm your host, Maya. Today we are embarking on a deep psychological and neurological journey into a feeling that almost every human being has encountered at some point in their lives. The haunting whisper that says, "I'm not good enough," or the paralyzing weight of feeling inferior to those around us. Before we dive into the mechanics of the mind, I want you to take a moment to acknowledge that if you've ever felt this way, you are not broken. You are not inherently less than. What you are experiencing is actually a sophisticated, albeit outdated, biological survival mechanism. In today's session, we are going to deconstruct what is happening deep within your cerebral architecture and learn how to recalibrate your nervous system to turn that inner critic into a source of profound personal power. To understand why we feel inferior, we have to travel back, not just years, but millennia. We must look at our evolutionary biology. You see, our ancestors lived in tight-knit tribal societies where social standing wasn't just about ego, it was a matter of life and death. In the Pleistocene epoch, being less capable or socially rejected meant you might be ostracized from the tribe, and in that environment, isolation was a death sentence. Consequently, our brains developed an ultra-sensitive social radar. This is an ancient defensive program designed to constantly scan our environment and compare our status to others. We are biologically hardwired for social comparison to ensure we remain valuable enough to stay protected by the group. However, here's the problem. We are no longer living in the Stone Age. We aren't fighting for scraps of meat or hiding from apex predators. Yet our nervous system hasn't received the update. When you scroll through social media and see someone's highlight reel, or when you stand in a boardroom feeling overshadowed by a colleague's expertise, your brain reacts as if you are about to be kicked out of the tribe and left to starve. Neurologically, this process is governed by something called the default mode network, DMN. The DMN is a large-scale brain network that becomes highly active when we are not focused on the outside world, when we are daydreaming, ruminating, or in our heads. One of the primary functions of the DMN is self-referential processing. It is essentially the self system that constantly evaluates, how am I doing? How do others perceive me? Am I meeting the standards of my environment? When we are in a state of rest, the DMN often defaults to a negativity bias, scanning for potential social threats or personal inadequacies. It's an automatic self-assessment tool that, if left unchecked, can spiral into a cycle of chronic inferiority. When this DMN-driven self-criticism takes over, it isn't just a thought, it's a full-body biochemical event. Your brain perceives social inferiority as a stressor, triggering the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The result? A surge of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. While cortisol is designed to help us escape physical danger, in a modern context, it creates a state of hypervigilance. You feel your heart rate increase, your chest tighten, and your breath become shallow. This is somatic manifestations of your anxiety. Crucially, high levels of cortisol impair the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, rational thought, and complex problem solving. This is why when you feel inferior, you often feel brain fog. You literally cannot think your way out of the feeling because the rational part of your brain has been hijacked by the survival centers. Furthermore, this state of mind disrupts our reward chemicals. Dopamine, which fuels our motivation and pursuit of goals, begins to plummet. When you feel unworthy, your brain stops signaling that effort is worth it. You become lethargic and lose your drive. Simultaneously, serotonin levels associated with feelings of status, belonging, and emotional stability drop significantly. This creates a feedback loop of loneliness and perceived worthlessness, making you feel disconnected from the world around you. It's a profound chain reaction. A single comparative thought leads to a biochemical shift, which then alters your mood, which then dictates your behavior. It's like driving a car through a sudden, thick fog. You didn't ask for the fog, and you can't just wish it away. But here's the key insight from a somatic and neurobiological perspective. You don't have to fight the fog, you just need to learn how to navigate through it safely. To begin this navigation, we utilize a concept called interoception, the ability to sense the internal state of your body. Instead of getting lost in the story of why you aren't good enough, we start by observing the sensation. I want to introduce the first of 3 transformative steps to recalibrating this response. Step 1. Personifying the internal dialogue. When that voice of inferiority arises, don't identify with it. Instead, give it a name. Label it as a character. Perhaps it's the perfectionist or the social critic. By naming the voice, you create a neurological distance between your true self and the temporary activity of your default mode network. You move from being the feeling to observing the feeling. This cognitive diffusion allows your prefrontal cortex to come back online, giving you the space to breathe and reassess. Once we have established that essential psychological distance by naming the inner critic, we move into a more active phase of intervention. This leads us to step 2, the art of cognitive reframing through scriptotherapy. In the realm of clinical psychology, when we allow feelings of inferiority to swirl aimlessly within our minds, they tend to morph into what I call emotional fog, a state where our perceptions become distorted and exaggerated. To counter this, I want you to pick up a pen and a journal. This isn't just about venting, it is an act of externalization. You are literally moving data from the bioelectrical circuits of your brain onto a physical medium. When you see your thoughts, statements like, "I'm fundamentally inadequate," or "everyone is light years ahead of me," written in black and white, they lose their spectral power. You can now perform a neural data analysis. Ask yourself, with the cold objectivity of a scientist, what is the empirical evidence for this claim? And more importantly, what cognitive distortions are at play here? Usually, you will find traces of overgeneralization, taking one setback and labeling your entire life a failure, or mental filtering, where your brain selectively ignores your triumphs while magnifying your flaws. By writing these down, you are engaging your executive function. You are moving from the reactive emotional centers to the logical prefrontal cortex. You can then begin to reframe these thoughts. Instead of the static, hopeless sentence, "I am a failure," you reconstruct it into a growth-oriented narrative. "I am currently navigating a complex learning curve, and this specific friction is providing the necessary data for my future mastery." This isn't toxic positivity, it is a deliberate restructuring of your neural pathways. While we master our internal dialogue, we must also address the fact that the mind and the body exist in a seamless, bidirectional feedback loop. This brings us to step 3, leveraging the brain-body feedback loop. In neuroscience, we study proprioception and somatic feedback, the way your brain constantly monitors the tension in your muscles and the alignment of your spine to gauge your social safety. When you feel inferior, your body collapses into a submissive posture. Your shoulders round forward, your chest constricts, and your gaze drops. Your brain interprets this physical state as a confirmation of defeat. It signals the amygdala to stay in high stress mode, keeping your cortisol levels elevated and suppressing your testosterone, the hormone linked to social confidence and decisiveness. I want to challenge you to perform a somatic intervention. Even when you feel your confidence is at 0, manually override your posture. Stand tall, expand your chest to allow for full diaphragmatic breathing, and lift your chin. This change in physiology sends an immediate signal back through the vagus nerve to your brain. It says, the environment is secure. We are in a position of agency. Research in social psychology suggests that even a brief period of power posing or simply maintaining an open, upright posture can measurably lower cortisol and increase feelings of self-efficacy. Even a slight, intentional smile in front of a mirror, despite how forced it may feel, can trigger the release of endorphins. You are effectively hacking your interoception to convince your brain that the situation is manageable. What I want you to realize is that these 3 steps, personifying the critic, cognitive reframing, and somatic intervention, are not just tips, they are forms of neuroplasticity training. Self-confidence is not a fixed trait that you are either born with or denied. It is a biological state that can be cultivated. It is the result of understanding your nervous system and choosing to respond with intention rather than reacting from a place of primal fear. Every time you practice these steps, you are strengthening the neural connections between your emotional brain and your rational brain. You are teaching your DMN, default mode network, that it no longer has the authority to define your worth. As we move forward in this session, we will look at how to sustain this state of mindful mastery even when the world outside feels overwhelmingly competitive. Remember, you are the architect of your own internal landscape. As we deepen our practice here at Simply Mindful, we must confront the modern catalyst that exacerbates our ancient survival instincts, the relentless culture of social comparison. In the previous segment, we discussed the self system within the default mode network. Now, let's explore how this network interacts with our neuroendocrine system when we are exposed to the idealized lives of others. In today's digital age, your brain is being bombarded with a volume of social data that it was never evolved to process. When you witness the curated success of a peer, your brain's ventral striatum, the area associated with reward and social status, may perceive a status threat. This triggers a subtle but persistent state of interoceptive distress. You feel a sinking sensation in your stomach or a tightening in your throat. This is your nervous system signaling a perceived drop in your social hierarchy. To navigate this, we must implement a strategy called cognitive decoupling. This involves intentionally separating your intrinsic value from your extrinsic achievements. We often fall into the trap of conditioned self-worth, where our internal peace is contingent upon being the best in the room. But from a neurological standpoint, this is a precarious way to live. It keeps your sympathetic nervous system in a constant state of low-grade fight or flight. I want to introduce a sophisticated technique to stabilize your internal state: neurosomatic anchoring. This is a method used by elite performers and psychologists to lock in a state of calm authority before the feeling of inferiority can take root. Anchoring works by associating a specific physical sensation with a state of nervous system regulation. I want you to try this now. Think of a moment in your life, no matter how small, where you felt completely capable, centered, and enough. Perhaps it was completing a difficult task, a moment of deep connection, or a personal breakthrough. As you hold that memory in your mind, pay close attention to your somatic experience. Where do you feel that confidence in your body? Is it a warmth in your chest, a steadiness in your legs? Once you feel that sensation, create a physical anchor, for example, firmly pressing your thumb and forefinger together. By doing this, you are creating a conditioned response. You are telling your brain, when this physical signal occurs, we enter a state of safety and competence. Over time, through the principle of long-term potentiation, the strengthening of synapses based on recent activity, you can trigger a state of calm simply by engaging your anchor. This allows you to walk into any room, no matter how intimidating, with a pre-activated sense of self-assuredness. However, we must also be honest about the resistant brain. Sometimes the feeling of inferiority is so deeply etched into our neural architecture due to childhood conditioning or past trauma that simple logic isn't enough. In these moments, we encounter the limbic system's stubbornness. The limbic system doesn't speak the language of words, it speaks the language of experience and sensation. This is why you can't just think your way out of a panic attack or a deep spiral of shame. You must feel your way out. When the fog of inferiority becomes a storm, I want you to practice vagal toning. The vagus nerve is the superhighway of your parasympathetic nervous system. By engaging in prolonged rhythmic exhalations, breathing out for twice as long as you breathe in, you send a direct biological command to your heart and brain to slow down. You are effectively cooling the emotional reactors of the brain. This creates a neural window of opportunity where you can then apply the cognitive tools we discussed earlier. Remember, the goal isn't to become an emotionless robot. The goal is to become a mindful observer of your own biology. When you feel less than, it is simply your brain's ancient software trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows. By recognizing this, you reclaim your agency. You are no longer a victim of your neurochemistry. You are the conscious navigator of your mind. In our final part, we will discuss how to integrate these practices into a long-term lifestyle of radical self-competence and how to turn your sensitivity into your greatest cognitive asset. As we approach the conclusion of today's session, I want to leave you with a perspective that shifts the very foundation of how you view your weaknesses. In the previous parts, we've deconstructed the biological roots of inferiority and practiced somatic interventions. But now, we must address the long-term integration, how to live a life of radical self-competence. True confidence is not the absence of doubt. Rather, it is the mastery of your relationship with doubt. From a neurobiological standpoint, we are aiming for neuroplastic resilience. This is the brain's ability to adapt its functional connectivity in response to consistent mindful practice. Every time you catch yourself in a spiral of comparison and choose to return to your anchor, you are physically rewiring your brain. You are weakening the synaptic strength of the inferiority loop and fortifying the pathways of the prefrontal cortex. I want you to consider the concept of interoceptive awareness as a superpower. Most people are at the mercy of their bodily sensations. They feel a tightness in their chest and immediately conclude, I am failing. But as a student of Simply Mindful, you now know better. You recognize that sensation as merely data. When you feel that familiar tug of inadequacy, I want you to greet it with curiosity instead of contempt. Say to yourself, my nervous system is attempting to protect me. My DMN is scanning for social threats. Thank you for the warning, but I am safe. This act of mindful acknowledgement prevents the emotional hijack and keeps you in the driver's seat of your life. Remember, your brain is an organ designed for survival, not necessarily for your happiness. Happiness and confidence are skills that we must intentionally curate through the understanding of our own biology. You are not a static entity. You are a dynamic, evolving system of energy and information. If you have spent years, perhaps even decades, feeling less than, please be patient with your nervous system. You are undoing years of evolutionary conditioning and personal history, but with every breath, every reframed thought, and every moment of somatic grounding, you are claiming your territory. You are enough, not because of what you have achieved, but because of your inherent capacity to witness, understand, and transform your own mind. That is the essence of being simply mindful. I truly hope that today's deep dive into the inferiority brain has provided you with the clarity and the tools you need to navigate your inner world with more grace and authority. Understanding the fog is the first step. Choosing to drive through it with awareness is the second. If you found value in this neurological exploration and want to support the creation of more high-level, science-backed mindfulness content, I invite you to become a part of our inner circle. By joining the Simply Mindful membership for a small monthly contribution, you directly enable us to continue this mission of mental empowerment. Members also gain the exclusive opportunity to vote on future topics, ensuring that we address the challenges that matter most to you. If you are in a position to support us financially, your presence alone is a gift. Simply hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing this video with someone who might be struggling with their own inner critic helps our community grow. Thank you for trusting me, Maya, to be your guide on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember to be kind to your magnificent, evolving brain. This is Simply Mindful, wishing you a peaceful and empowered journey ahead.